in the Pearl Jam camp if it's like this bad at Nirvana. We went out with Pearl Jam and it was just the fucking exact opposite. You know, every person was like super cool, friendly, helpful. There were people in the Nirvana camp who were just like thumping their chests at how proud they were to be working with Nirvana. And there was nothing like that happening over in Pearl Jam world. And it was like, oh, you can be at this level and run things in a smart way and you don't have to hire a bunch of dicks.
As soon as they were out playing that first show with us and we were like interacting really for the first time in a few years in a real way, I remember thinking like, wow, this is a really good thing. And then when Kurt died, I think it was really important that we were all together at that time. You know, I think it was a wake-up call for us to have Mark and Steve and those guys there at that time, because it told us that we could stop at any time and take a break.
Gostaria de apresentar dois integrantes do grunge Mudhoney, Mr. Steve Turner and Mr. Mark Arm. Right now, Sao Paulo, it's time to kick out the jams, motherfuckers! I gotta kick 'em out! Well, I feel pretty good, and I guess that I could get crazy now, baby. Just one or two, and just a move like crazy now, baby. I know how you like it, child. My knees tight. Girl, it's still when you're doing it right. I mean, you understand. Kick out the jams. Yeah, kick out the jams. I gotta kick 'em out.
It was very obvious it was going to be the last one for Warner Brothers. Everybody at Reprise was gone, basically, you know. One of the new guys at Warner's, you know, wanted to hear demos and didn't hear a hit and all that kind of shit, which we'd never had to deal with before. We'd always just, you know, delivered the finished product to them and they did what they could with it, you know.
He wanted to drop Mudhoney right when he got there, but he was going to wait to hear the demos. And he was actually impressed with what they had done. I'm like, hey, what whoop-de-doo for you, right?
He knew that we weren't going to make him any more money. And I don't think like Reprise had had a radio hit since Alanis Morissette, which was 3 or 4 years before, which in major label time is forever. He was brought in because he had produced the breakthrough Sugar Ray album. They brought him in because they figured since he'd produced a crappy breakthrough record that he could get more made.
You know, I remember there was one song, Oblivion, which, you know, that was the song that, you know, that the boss thought was the single. He had all these like little detail like mix ideas that he had to throw in there.
He'd had some other hits, so, you know, these record people get cocky and they think they can, I can hear a hit now, I got the golden ear.
We probably went into the studio to mix Oblivion 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how many times.
It shows exactly why the record industry is dying, because they just throw money at bullshit for no reason.
Woke up this morning, I had a laugh.
Each record you do for a record label, the advance grows, and we were selling less and less records.
I think they got keen to us as well. They knew that we would, you know, take, you know, our money and record cheaply and pocket the rest.
So if we didn't spend it recording, we weren't going to get it anyway. Why don't we actually hire a producer and spend some money and see what that's like? Obviously, no one's going to give us that money again.
It was a great record on so many different levels, produced by the legendary Jim Dickinson.
released into major obscurity.
It was one of the first records that they put out at like a higher price.
Once the record came out, they just sort of did nothing with it. They wanted it to disappear.
There was that time that we had to drop them, and the conversation was almost like, who cares? They'll go on and do their thing. Nobody was surprised, and the relationship ended in a really good way, where it was like, I think we all agreed that even if Warner Brothers wanted to keep the Reprise wanted to keep them on, probably wasn't the right place for them to be. The music industry had completely changed.
It was fairly brutal. Like, the shows were getting really small. It was definitely the lowest point as far as playing live shows in the States. It was like, fuck, man, like 150 people in some shitty Florida town or something. I was like, ugh.
It must have been a pretty discouraging situation for them to be in. And of course, subsequently, Matt Lukin left, which was a factor in what was going on as well, I believe.
It seemed like a pretty good time to quit. The touring wasn't going to make us any money anymore,
I think he might have even stuck around as long as he did because he thought he was going to let the rest of us down if he quit. And that was a tough blow.
The last 3 or 4 years in the band, I was like hoping that somebody else would quit or somebody else would make a move so I didn't have to. Because I hate to be the one quitting. I hate to let people down. I was just kind of sick of music and pop culture in general altogether. Just hated everything to do with it and anybody who felt it was important. I was working as a carpenter during my off time. It was kind of like going back to the beginning, back when I was like 18, 19 again. I'll work during the week and go play Melvin's gigs on the weekend, It was kind of like having to go back to that. It's like, I didn't want to do that.
There's some drinking and smoking to do.
We had always kind of, had this idea of Mudhoney being Mark, Steve, Matt, and Dan. And if one of us, was not in the picture, that we would not be a band. I don't know if that's some kind of idealistic kind of, Three Musketeers and whatever. But I guess there's 4. But so when Matt quit, my whole thing was, well, the idea of getting another bass player is not something that I'm into at all.
Dan didn't want to do it without Matt. They were kind of like the two partners to me and Mark. They roomed together and all that kind of stuff,
These guys wanted to start an internet record label, and they hired me to produce an album. Mudhoney came up in the conversation as being a band that just gets better as time goes on. And so we got a hold of them, and they said they'd be interested in talking about it.
It's probably been about a year, and so we got together.
Started working on some things, and it felt good. There's a chemistry that we have.
So I went up there and met the guys, and I made them an offer they couldn't refuse.